Welcome to our webinar where we're going to look at the nitty-gritty of how, when we teach children to read, we really do need to attend to all those different parts of reading to help our children become fully fluent readers, because that, of course, is the aim of teaching children to read, is to help them be able to read anything. So I know that you were told a little bit about me, but I have been told that you should know a bit more. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I have been working in education for a very long time. We worked out that it's 30 years now since I graduated from Homerton College, Cambridge, with my B.Ed. And since then, I've worked in schools all around the country and the world, including Malaysia, in not Kuala Lumpur, in Pulau Pinang, and Indonesia on Sumatra, as well as Zimbabwe, all about the place, as well as schools in the UK as well. I was an associate member of the inaugural English Hubs Council for the Department of Education in the UK, and I remain a phonics expert for the Department of Education. I have worked on curriculum review for the Department of Education, looking at letters and sounds and how we teach early reading, as well as how we help early careers teachers with the leadership of English in their schools. Right now, I am the early reading expert and phonics advisor for Little Wandle Letters and Sounds Revised, and I help develop the programme. And I'm also series editor for Big Cat for Letters and Sounds, which is an amazing array of wonderful phonics books that I'm sure that you've got in your schools. And alongside that, I also currently lecture for Essex and Thames as the lead in English for students who want to be primary teachers. So enough about me. Let's talk about reading. I love this quote by William James. It is ancient, but it is absolutely what we need to be thinking about. If we want children to be able to take flight into that world of reading, we need to really attend to every aspect of reading. And that means we need to teach them to read fluently and well. So that is so much more than just being able to lift the words off the page. Professor Kate Kane talks about children being able to have an accurate mental model of what they're reading in her book. And she is really clear that that accurate mental model of what you read moment by moment must be both flexible and comprehensive, so that when children are reading, they are connecting to what they know, they are thinking about what they read, and they are creating a model of reading as they read in their minds. It might be visually, it might be in other ways. But the point is, in order to be able to do that, you've got to be pretty accurate and expert at getting the words off the page, because it takes a lot of effort to create an accurate mental model of what you read as you read. So let's look at how we can do that in school with our children, so that we really do genuinely create readers and readers for life. So the key messages today are that we should have high expectations for all our children, that we really can teach all our children to read. We should be thinking about the needs of the lowest 20% to ensure that all children get the support when they need it, and actually as they need it. The way to teach reading is through phonics and growing the alphabetic code. That is how we're going to be able to read every word whenever we want to read it. And of course, if we don't teach all aspects of reading with our decodable books, we aren't teaching reading. So we must teach all the aspects of reading, not just decoding when we're using our decodable books. And all of this comes together when we create a school that puts a love of reading at its heart, where we make time to read aloud to children, and we really do grow teachers with the expertise and knowledge about children's literature, so that they can enthusiastically set fire to children's imaginations about reading and help them really see the world through reading as well. So in the UK here, we have an ambition that every child in primary school is able to read fluently and with confidence by the time they get to secondary. And we know this really matters. 85% of the curriculum in secondary schools is negotiated through the act of reading. If your children are not reading fluently and well, by the time that they are in secondary school, there won't be the expertise, the expert teaching of reading to support those children, and they won't have access to the full curriculum if they are unable to read without support. So really ensuring that all our children, by the time they get to secondary school, are reading fluently should be an ambition for every school, no matter where we are in the world. Now, those of you who saw me last time know that this simple view of reading by Tumner and Goff from 1986 has been crucial in the UK and around the world in helping us understand the processes that ensure that children can learn to read. We can see this as a diagnostic model. We can see this as a model to help us think about what we need to be teaching when we're teaching reading. We need to ensure that our word recognition processes are really, really strong and good, so that our cognitive load is not thinking about lifting the words off the page, because the language comprehension processes, the thinking about the reading and the words, are the things that are going to come into play as we read more and more complex texts. So I'm going to make you think about a text that is tricky that you might have read, when you could read the words off the page, but you had to stop and think and use your language comprehension processes in order to understand what you're reading. If we don't have the really strong word recognition processes, oh my goodness, it's really hard to connect with that book. So books that maybe have got really long technical language in them, sometimes that slows us down. But if the actual subject matter of the book is tricky, that slows us down as well. So even as expert readers, we might end up in this quartile here, where we can read everything, but perhaps we haven't got the language comprehension processes to understand and create that accurate mental model of what we're reading as we read it. And this is the important thing for us to think about when we move on to that Scarborough reading rope, is that actually reading is a complex and orchestrated process. And it is by ensuring full fluency of every strand of the Scarborough reading rope that we are going to ensure that children are reading with automaticity, and enough automaticity for the act of reading itself, the getting the words off the page, the connecting with the vocabulary itself, the minute by minute, word by word understanding of the text, for that to be fluent enough for the children to genuinely have comprehension. So the important thing you will remember about the Scarborough reading rope is that at the beginning, all of those strands are separated. And it's only over time and through practice that those strands become in themselves one nice thick thread. And it's then only when those are practiced again and again and again do we end up with our super entwined rope, where the reading and the language comprehension actually strengthen each other. Now, if we think about this in terms of practice, fluency becomes the word that we are looking for. How do we help our children become fluent in all of these aspects? Well, yes, we need to attend to the word reading very early on in reception in year 1 or kindergarten and year 1 in your schools. And that needs lots and lots of practice with the English language because it's complex. But also we need to attend to all the other parts, the language comprehension parts as well, which will be through talk, which will be through exploring books together, and it will be through great teaching of reading with those decodable books. It is only when we practice and aim for full fluency that we will fly into the arms of our dance partner, the book, and know that we will be caught. And it is through extensive practice all the way through the primary school that we grow readers. So what I'm going to say to you today is, yes, early reading really matters, but the teaching of reading all the way through your school is going to help your children become fluent, effortless, and joyous readers. So let's look at the nitty-gritty. Let's get down into the phonics so that we're really clear about what we are doing. We know that phonics is a really simple thing. It's making the connections between the sounds of our spoken words and the letters that we use to write them down. So here it is. This is my code. This is a sentence. I would like you to see if you can break this code and actually write that sentence down for me in the chat. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to have a look at it. Can you break this code? Because this is what our children do when they're reading. They are breaking the code. All right, I've given you a few seconds to look at the code. And I can't see anybody has typed in an answer yet. So what if I said to you that 00 makes the sound E? Does that help you? Oh, we've got a can break the code at the end. That's very good. Can anybody get the beginning bit now? We've got 00. 00 is saying E. Come on. Reading is easy, Charlene, if you can break the code. Why isn't it easy? Let's just have a look at how my code is mirroring the English alphabetic code and its complexity. I have actually made it much easier for you than, than if you were reading English. Can you see that the EA, the E sound in the word reading is represented by the letters EA. In the word easy, the sounds E is represented by EA and Y. Now, annoyingly, the letters EA in break are making a different sound. So we've got the two aspects of the alphabetic code that are tricky in English. We've got many letters, many graphemes that make one sound, and graphemes that make more than one sound. And that's why we call it the complex alphabetic code. And that's why teaching children to read English needs to be done over time and really, really systematically. So when we're teaching children to read, we need to build that alphabetic code. We need to start with the basics. So in the letters and sounds and in Little Wandle, we start with what we call phase 2, which is all of the consonant graphemes and sounds and the short vowel sounds, a, e, o, a. And that allows us to read and write lots and lots of words. But if we give the children too much knowledge at once, it is going to overwhelm them. And if we don't put it into a schema, it's unlikely that the children will remember it. So chunking knowledge really helps us. So that's why we have things like these lovely grapheme charts, because they give children something to hold that knowledge onto. We talked last time, didn't we, about the importance of the mnemonics, those strong images that link the sound of the word to an object, that linked to the grapheme, so the whole thing was creating a lovely bit of feedback loop. But when we're talking about growing the code more, we need to grow that schema. So I'm going to show you some knowledge. Here you go. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to think about it. I'm going to make it go. And I'm going to ask you to put that knowledge in the chat. How many of those letters can you remember? Off you go. Come on, let's see those letters in the chat now. How many can you remember? We've got 3 letters. Can anyone beat 3 letters? Oh, 3 from Yaya. 6 from Ignatius. Christine's got 3. Helen's got 3. Right, so we're looking at 3 to 6. I'm going to show you that knowledge in a different format. I'm going to give you the same amount of time. Okay, I'm making it go. How many can you put up now? Oh, look at that. Suddenly we've got double, triple, so many. Why? Why is it that suddenly you are able to remember all of this when before you couldn't? Well, you've just seen the power of schemas. A schema, and in which this case was a whole load of acronyms that you probably know because they're internationally, yes, exactly, because they're internationally known, the letters are now meaningful, you could retain that knowledge. And that's exactly how schemas work. And that's exactly how the teaching of early reading needs to be done. It needs to be systematic, and it needs to build on knowledge that the children have already got. So we start with phase 2 and we grow that part of the schema. And you can see actually, even whilst we're growing phase 2 in reception, we are adding to it with our double letters and the different ways that k can be written down. And then when that's secure, we build on the long vowel sounds. And again, we're using the catchphrase to help the children understand that. Now, in a really good phonics program, you will have securing the schema in reception so that you've got the basis of the knowledge sorted, so that when it comes to the second year of teaching, the children are leaning on that knowledge, that prior knowledge, to build the schema, to build that really complex alphabetic code. 44 sounds, more than 150 ways of writing those sounds down. So if we listen to what Daniel Willingham says, memory is a remnants of our thoughts, what do we want the children to think about? We want them to think about that schema. We want them to be able to really connect to that initial schema to be able to grow the code. And they are going to grow that code through that repeated practice, because we need effortless understanding of the GPCs, of the grapheme phoneme correspondences from the first code before we move on to the second code. And we need lots and lots and lots of practice of reading those words, so that the words that the children have read in reception have gone into their orthographic store, so that the words themselves are effortless when they read them. Do you remember? It doesn't take you any effort to read any of these words because they are in your orthographic store. Although you are using your phonics to read them, you're not thinking about it. Your cognitive load is low because those words are in your orthographic store. So we have got a tricky thing to deal with in the English language. We've got a very complex code, and that's due to the history of the English language, where we can see historically we've got lots and lots of language influences. We've got originally a Celtic base for our language, and then along comes Latin and the lovely Viking Norse language, Old Norse, and that language all creates a very rich language. So in English, we have compound words, that comes from the Norse. We've got Roman-based words, comes from the Latin. We've got Greek-based words, also from the Renaissance and the Latin as well. And then we've got the Celtic base. On top of that, around the 1400s to the 1700s, we have a thing called the Great Vowel Shift. And the Great Vowel Shift changed how we said the sounds in the words. It was part of the migration from Birmingham after the Black Death. And for about 300 years, we changed how we said our vowel sounds. So we kept them written down the same way, but we've changed how we say them. So this has massive implications for our children because they've got to read that code, and that code is vast. What's also happening now is that our English language continues to change and continues to be influenced by the languages in the world, and now the internet, and all of this richness comes back to us in the world's, I mean, it's one of the largest languages, 250,000 words in common usage, millions of words in the dictionary. And that is really exciting. And it's a great, wonderful treasure house to delve into, but it comes with its issues. So teaching children to read is really key in order for them to be able to reach all that language. So our KN saying comes from the Viking, for example. So we've got our basic phase 2 and 3 grapheme chart that we need to embed and understand before we move on to this more complex code. So what does this complex code mean for our children? Well, we need to help them grow the understanding of these alternative pronunciations. So this grapheme OU can make the sound ow as in cloud, o as in shoulder, and as in touch. And these are graphemes that are commonly found in words and are found in common words. So these graphemes are worth teaching. This grapheme is worth teaching, and its pronunciation is worth teaching so the children can read all those words. So we can see how one grapheme is becoming many sounds. And we can also see that one sound, sh, can be written down in many ways. So we teach the initial code, sh, shell, in reception, but then we come across all these glorious spellings. So we've got the French spelling of sh, as in chef, and chalet, and Charlotte. And we've got the CI that you'll find in special, and election, I was going to say election, that's not correct, politician, and then we've got TI as in caption, SI as in mansion, and SSI as in passion. And you'll also find SI in delicious. So these different ways of writing the sound down are very, very important. The thing that you need to know is that these graphemes can only be found, some of them, in certain parts of the word. Now, why is this important? Well, when we're teaching children to learn to read, spelling does help strengthen reading, and reading does help strengthen spelling. But spelling takes longer to code and to understand and to embed than reading. Why? Because when we're reading, the graphemes are there for us. All we have to do is translate them into sound and blend them in our minds to say the word and connect with the word and its meaning. But if I want to spell a word, I have to hold all those processes in my head. I have to say the word, say the sounds, and then work out how to write them down. Now, really great teaching of spelling actually spends time thinking about that code, because although the word, for example, ship, could be spelt with SH, CH, TI, SSI, CI, SSI, and CI, it can't. It can't. It can only actually start with SI, because CH doesn't happen at the beginning of a word if it's got an I after it. You cannot find it because it does not code in French. Ship can only be spelt with SH at the beginning. So there's something really important for us to help our children see that actually, although I've got a vast code ahead of me when I'm spelling and reading, there are only certain things that graphemes can do, and their position in the word and the relationship to the root word, and then maybe the suffixes, is actually really important. And this is where it gets quite exciting, because if I were teaching this in Key Stage 2, I would start to talk about etymology, about where words come from and how they work. And I would start to talk about morphology and what happens when we add suffixes and prefixes to words and we change the word and what its it's grammar classes, it's word classes with all of those things. I mean, it is a vast and fascinating thing. And it is a piece of study that's worth doing with your children all the way through Key Stage 2. And I'm going to say to you, you never stop using phonics. A really great teacher uses phonics in spelling all the time because it is the bedrock of spelling. So I want to spell chef. I could spell chef, S-H-E-F. Those are the sounds in it, aren't they? Sh, e, f. Actually, if I know something about the origin of the word, it is French, it is likely that it's going to start with CH, but it cannot start with TH, SH, or CI. Why? Because those graphemes are always going to be with AN, ON, or OUS. That is what they do. That is where you will find them making sh in a word. And it's that knowledge that helps our children become accurate spellers. And the better they are at spelling, the more they've embedded that code, actually, the more fluent their reading will be. It's that stopping and thinking and really being curious about language that does help our children at all stages become both fluent in reading and writing. Okay, so we said that the phonics is the bedrock of the reading, but actually when we're reading, we need to teach that fluency. What does it look like when we're teaching fluency in decodable books? Well, the first thing that we need to think about is the book at the right level? For our children to be successful when they're reading, we need to closely match what the children know, their secure phonic knowledge, to the right books. So this child here, who is reading Autumn 1 sounds and can read sat and man and hug and red and peck, is going to be reading a book at the right level. It's going to be a phase 2 book and not a phase 3 book, because phase 3 has got the long vowel sounds in it. So that match is really important. And what we say is that actually you want to be looking at about 90% fluency for successful instruction. So that means that children are stopping and thinking about sounding out one word in 10, particularly when we're looking at those books a bit higher up. So that if I was reading It Is Hidden, one of my favorite books, then we'd really be hoping that the children would be reading most of those words without any effort, but they might need to stop and think and sound out that longer word, for example. Now, why is that important? And does it seem like enough challenge? I think we're all quite used to children slightly struggling with their books. The research is very clear that the 90% fluency is the right level for successful instruction for children. It does create challenge. For children, when they're reading independently, it actually needs to be even higher so that they really can connect with what they're reading. This is a level of effort that we need to take into account for a child who's reading at 90% accuracy. So let's just look at this here. This is not easy to understand. This is not absolutely the world's most easy piece of reading, because I'm having to stop and think about one word in 10. But when I'm reading this text with 100% accuracy, which is the aim, then you can start to see how that fluency and that lack of effort is helping me understand what I'm reading. When children are battling and working hard to work out one word in 10, they are not able to get very much more than to just lift the words off the page, which is why we are always aiming for our children, by the time we finish teaching them to read each book that we practice with, for this level of accuracy, that they can read and understand every single word. Because otherwise, what is the point of that book if we haven't read and understood it? So what does this mean for our teaching? Well, what I'd like to show you is a reading speed that is a common reading speed for a child in year 1, which is 60 words per minute. Below 90 words per minute, a child is not able to comprehend what they're reading as they read it. So when we're teaching reading, quite often children are reading at 60 words per minute and less. Let's be really clear that some children are reading way less than that. So I'm going to show you 60 words per minute. It's a text very much at your level. And I want to see if you can do the thing that Professor Kate Kane talked about as you're reading it, which is, can you create an accurate mental model as you're reading, word by word, flexibly and interchangeably, so that at the end of the text, you've got a sound understanding of the text in your mind. All right, so that's your job. We're going to read for a minute, and at the end of it, we're going to see what our comprehension is like. Okay, here we go. All right, what do you give yourself out of 10 for your comprehension after reading that text? Do you give yourself 5, 4, 3? Do you have an accurate mental model of what you read? Katie says 2. It's really, really hard to comprehend at 60 words per minute. And what I'm going to say to you is that your children in reception in year 1, kindergarten in year 1, your children who are beginner readers are definitely reading at that level if they are super successful in year 1. Below 90 words per minute, the accuracy is not enough for you to be able to attend to the meaning as you're reading. And now I'm going to ask you the question, as educators, that you're all going to hate. How many times have you been working with a group of children or a child with a Learn to Read book, and they've read a page to you and you ask them a question and they can't answer it, and you think, why can't they answer that? But we know why, don't we? Because actually all they were thinking about, so this is the Daniel Willingham thing, what do you want them to think about? All they can think about during that first read is lifting the words off the page. Their cognitive load is high. Even if that book is perfectly matched to their phonic knowledge, they are working hard to get those words off the page, which is why reading one of your practice reading books only once is actually not doing the best job for your children at all. To really grow children who read fluently and well, you are going to have to spend time with the books. So at Little Wandle, we thoroughly recommend a 3-read process with your decodable books. That first read is what we've just done. Can you read all the words? And if the children can read all the words, then we can get on with the other aspects of reading. And those other aspects of reading are reading fluently with expression and intonation, which we call prosody. And that prosody is really important because reading with the right intonation does lift the meaning from the page and creates the song of the sentence. That song of the sentence helps the children hear the meaning of the sentence. And by teaching the children the song of the sentence, we are teaching comprehension through modeling it. And that's really important. There's some really great research that shows when we teach children to read with prosody, so with that expression and the accurate tone, what we're helping them to do is to create an internal model of the text and how the sentence works. when they practice reading with prosody, they are internalizing the rhythm of the sentence. Now, this is really important, particularly for learners who have not got English as their first language or may have limited language experiences at home and haven't heard sentences aloud and heard the intonation creating that meaning. What the research shows really clearly is that that model becomes clear when they start to read in silence, so that the external prosody that we've taught the children becomes an internal prosody as they're reading in their heads silently later on. And that is really exciting, because children who are reading with internal prosody are reading with meaning. And they are doing what Kate Kane said. They are creating an accurate mental model of what they're reading in their minds as they read it. So this second read, the prosody read, I think is really, really important. And we do that with our children. We choose pages to really think about what's happening in the book on that page, and we bring it to life for them. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then on the third read, so we know they can read the words. We know that they can read those words with meaning and feeling and understanding. That's when we draw on the themes and the ideas of comprehension, because at that point, the children are ready to answer the question, how do you think they're feeling? What's happening here? What does this word mean in this sentence? We can attend to that because our cognitive load is so much lower, and we've got the space in our mind to connect with the comprehension aspect of the text that we're reading. And this is really, really important, because to grow readers, we need to teach reading rather than just listen to reading. Listening to reading will not teach reading. Listening to reading is a summative assessment of the child at that point. Unless you're teaching reading, all you're doing is basically assessing children on a regular basis, but you're not teaching them. So I would like you, I know that I can't see you, so this is all going to be a bit bizarre, but I would love you to be my reception class in the summer term. We've got this glorious book here, the one that you could see the title from before, I Love It by Sue Rayner. And we've read the book one time through, and we've discussed the fact that Brooke is he's a bit of a worrier. You know, all the way through the book, we've seen that he doesn't want to try things, but his dad is very, very brave. And he keeps on saying to him, come on, give it a go, give it a go, give it a go. And you know what happens? Each time Brooke says, I love it. But he starts off saying, I don't like it. I don't want to do it. And I have chosen this because it reminds me of my middle daughter, but that's slightly by the by. Right, so in this first page, children, we talked about this is a really important part of the book, because Brooke has got probably the most scary thing he's got to do, because he's eaten food he didn't like, he's done all sorts of things that he didn't think he liked, and it turned out fine. But this one, if he jumps off the cliff and he does not swoop and float, he might crash to the ground. And actually, that is a bit of a worry. So it starts off like this. Brooke flaps. I'm saying it like that because I'm making it a little bit scary, a little bit of tension. So copy me. Brooke flaps. Amazing. Now, let's think. Then he swoops and floats on the wing. So he swoops. I'm going to say it like that. He swoops and floats on the wind. All right, copy me. Then he swoops and floats on the wind. Amazing. And then, what does Brooke say? Because this is him tumbling, and then he's floating off, and he says, yippee! This is the best fun ever. And can you see he's saying it with feeling, and he's saying it with a feeling of joy and excitement. So we're all going to have a go now. I'm ready to listen to you say your yippee, and we're going to say it like we're so excited. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Yippee! Amazing reception. This is the best fun ever. Your turn. Oh, I love that. Right, now, let's just have a look. I'm just loving this bit of expression here where we've got Brooke and he's talking. And he's going to, it says here, he hoots. So we're going to make dad sound like a hoot. So we might go, I'm trying to think how you'd make dad sound like a hoot, children. Dad, dad. Or maybe he goes, dad, dad. Do flamingos sound like that? Oh, you want the first one? Dad, hoots Brooke. Now, we've got a lovely bit of punctuation there. Can you see we've got our wait and see dots? So he's going to make his dad wait to see what he's going to say. So at first he's saying like, I do not like flight, because he's been saying that about everything. And then he's going to go, wait and see. And the surprise is, well, it's not a surprise, is it, children? I love it. So I'm going to have a go. My turn and then yours. Dad, hoots Brooke. I do not like flight. Wait and see. I love it. Your turn. I love the way you did that. That was gorgeous, children. And what we know is that Brooke, yes, he loves flight, and all of the things that he was scared about, it turns out that his dad was right. Yes, we should try things all the time. Let's have a look, everybody, now you're not reception children anymore, at a film of this in action. We've got lovely Jess here with some reception children, and they're reading a book about mess on the beach. And what we can see here is how Jess is teaching that prosody to the children so that they are able to read with expression and fluency.
It says it is a big mess. Now I'm looking at this picture and my goodness, there is an awful lot of mess on the beach, isn't there? So they really mean it's a big mess. So when I go into the word big, my voice, I'm going to add a bit more expression to that word to show how much of a mess it is, like this, big. Okay, like, and the whole sentence will sound like this. It is a big mess. And that's showing them that it's really an awful lot of rubbish on the beach. Listen again. It is a big mess. Should we try it together? It is a big mess. Fantastic. Try it on your own. It is a big mess. Very good.
How lovely. And can you see how the children, sorry, are mastering their fluency and mastering their expression? Jess has ensured that they could read the text, and now they're bringing it to life. They're bringing the song of the sentence alive as they read it, gaining that mastery and gaining their understanding and comprehension as they do.
It says,
oops. So when we're teaching reading, we are teaching prosody and fluency, but it's absolutely crucial, as we said right at the beginning, that language comprehension processes, that whole piece actually happens in our practice all the time. And those times are when we read and share books with children one-to-one, particularly in nursery or kindergarten and reception, that very important interaction with children where we're connecting to the books and we're reading together, and that spark of joy between an adult and a child is so important. How we organize our reading areas so that the books connect to the children and they can create the stories from the pictures for them is also crucial. And then, of course, as practitioners, when we read aloud to children, creating that excitement and joy, ensuring that we're using really great prosody when we read, which does mean sometimes that you need to really get behind the meaning of the text. You need to make up those voices. You need to know those texts really well so that you can create that prosody. And sometimes you might look a little bit silly, but of course that is part of being a primary school teacher. It's the love of reading that we show in our day-to-day practice when we are sharing books with children, and our love of teaching reading that combines to ensure that all our children learn to read. And I love this quote by Michael Morpurgo, that reading is the one ability that once set in motion has the capacity to feed itself, to grow exponentially, providing a base from which the possibilities are infinite. And it is our care that we take as primary educators that ensures that all of our children are afforded access to the incredible world of books and all of the benefits that being able to read entails and gives to our children. So thank you very much for spending some time with me this morning. I'm just going to put up the keep in touch details from HarperCollins, and I believe that we are going to do a Q&A now, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Just lots of people saying thank you, so I guess we'll echo that. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for such a lovely presentation, and very much welcome to Lizzie for joining us for the Q&A. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending everyone who has attended today the webinar recording, as well as the certificate of attendance for you to refer back to, and my colleague will now paste the link for the attendance certificate into the chat box. If we don't get around to answering every question, or you'd like to see some sample copies, please do contact us at collins.international@harpercollins.co.uk. The email address is shown on the final slide. So now onto the Q&A. We had an amazing question from the chat box, actually, and I'm very glad that we caught it. So someone has asked, as a school, we invested very heavily in Big Cat books this academic year. How does Little Wandle fit in with these books? Are both schemes interchangeable? I understand that in the UK, combining schemes is not allowed anymore. Thank you so much. Who wants to answer this one?
Brilliant. I'll take that one. So I think Little Wandle, the Reader Sit, is part of the overall Big Cat programme. So they follow, I guess, the same approach that everybody knows and loves from Big Cat. Really fantastic authors writing really amazing books. The difference with the Little Wandle books is that they are fully aligned to the Little Wandle letters and sounds progression. And what that means is that as children, if they're following that particular phonic progression, they will have reading books that are fully decodable in line with that. So they will only have grapheme phony correspondences that they know how to decode as they work their way through that programme. It's hard to comment in detail without knowing which other Big Cat books you have bought. For example, if you've bought the Big Cat Phonics for Letters and Sounds 2007, because what Little Wandle is it's an update and a revision of that Letters and Sounds progression, sort of bringing it up to date in line with latest research and assessment requirements. But in particular for those 2007 Letters and Sounds books, we have a full matching chart to the Little Wandle progression, showing you how you can match in the books that you've bought and where they are fully decodable in line with that progression. If it's Big Cat books that go beyond phonics, so sit at levels above phonics, then those are absolutely fine as well, because there will come a certain point where children have worked their way through the alphabetic code and they then need to move on to a non-decodable reading book where further things are being challenged. So the complexity of the grammar and the complexity of the plots is coming in and longer extents to build up their their ability to read a longer text. So there's lots of support for you if you have bought those books for how to other books to how to match them in, how to use them alongside it, and certainly we could have a conversation with you separately to support you with that.
Yes, please do email us directly at the address shown on the final slide, and I think one of our reps would be happy to get in touch.
Yeah.
So moving on then, how do you know if a child is working at the right level for their age group?
Okay.
Yeah,
That's quite an interesting question. I think it really, so in the UK, we would be looking in initially at a phonics progression in terms of looking at age-related expectations for reading. So in the UK, we have the phonics screening check, which happens in year 1, which is one way that we can check our children at an appropriate level, but also for example, with Little Wandle, we have a progression that is matched to the year groups. And so we're assessing every 6 weeks what's been taught and whether or not the child has understood that and retained that. And then they're matching to the book. So for us, it would be about the child's progression through our progression and the signposts of expected progress. In terms of what is expected, we would, in most programs, most phonics programs, you would be expecting children to be finished phonics instruction by year 2 or in year 2, and therefore definitely be able to read anything by the end of year 2. And certainly in the UK, the expectation is that children are reading probably at 90 plus words per minute, if you want to think about that as a level, by the end of year 2, because they are given a SATs paper that really expects that. So there are lots of different ways of looking at it. Obviously, once you get to the point where you can get a reading age, then that's another way of looking at it. But you really don't want to start looking at reading ages before the point that the child is reading fluently and not needing phonics, because it's going to be very muddying before then. Is that okay, Lizzie, or would you like to add anything? You've got fluency assessments, haven't you?
We do as well. So yeah, Charlotte's absolutely right in terms of whether or not a child's reading in the right level book when they're working through a phonics program. So, an example with Little Wandle, it needs to be matched very carefully. And in the UK, there's quite strict guidance from Ofsted, our school inspectorate, around that. They're looking in UK schools to see that a child is reading in a decodable book at the right level, that they have knowledge of all the grapheme phoning correspondences to be able to read that book. So that's quite strict requirement for schools. So they will be looking at their phonic progression and matching books across. Beyond phonics, as I was talking about, we do publish a reading fluency resource that looks at children's accurate reading of words per minute. And there's lots of sort of different, they're basically assessment sheets that the teacher can use to hear a child read, and you mark it up with a coding to help you see whether they're omitting words, or they're substituting words, or reading words backwards, or missing out, all of these kinds of things. So you start to get an accurate picture of what the child's reading strategies, where they're falling down, and you look at their accurate words per minute, and there's guidance for how that corresponds to sort of age expectations.
And that's really useful, Lizzie, because that gives you lots of data that's about the child and where their issues are. And also it gives you this accurate reading words per minute, which also gives you a good idea of fluency. It just goes to show how complex actually it is to assess reading. It's not a simple thing at all. And perhaps sometimes that's been not really considered in its fullness by practitioners.
Brilliant, thank you. We've just had a really interesting question pop up in the Q&A box. Laura has asked, what are the consequences of not teaching children to read this way? What does the research show? And she gives an example of, in my country, there seems to be an explosion of cases of dyslexia. Is it connected at all?
So it is really interesting in schools in the UK where we are really attending to phonics, and certainly ensuring that children who may be taking longer to get the code are getting the additional practice. We're not seeing what people might have termed dyslexia before. Now, that is not to say dyslexia doesn't exist. It is a really specific neurotype that is very, very complex, and it isn't just about reading. And there are things about dyslexia, or potentially that could look like dyslexia, which are actually about vision and eye movement and all sorts of things. So, you cannot just say a child who's not reading is dyslexic, because that's a really, really complex neurotype that can only really be established by someone who's been trained to do so. And in the UK, that would be someone who's gone through years of training in order to do that. So that's an important thing to put to one side. The other thing, so the thing to say is that in the schools that we work with, the ones I know intimately, I would say that remedial reading issues are rare, and they are attended to. And unless there is a cognitive issue, most children in English primary schools taught by an SSP, so a systematic synthetic phonics program, which is well established and really rigorously taught with lots and lots of additional support for those children, they don't have a reading issue as such. They are not dyslexic. Well, they don't. I just think the term dyslexia might not be well understood and is used sometimes to explain children who aren't reading. That in the UK, that the reason we moved to an SSP is that we could see that the original Searchlight model, which is the model that lots of schools across the world still use, was failing many of our children. And that was the issue, was that there wasn't, you know, children were being failed massively by that, because they weren't being given a systematic way of working out what words were on the page. Instead, they were being taught to guess, and guessing is not a model for reading at all.
Yeah, I would just add to this that I think there's a fairly robust research base now proving proving that phonics works, and it's a core part of UK government policy around children's education and learning to read, and it's been sort of well scrutinised, and there's a really robust evidence now that it works, and it's seen as as a very strong methodology, because you equip children with an understanding of the alphabetic code. That means they can tackle any word. Any other methodology ultimately falls down, because it doesn't enable you to tackle any word, or to identify, take on a word without knowing what it means, and be able to decode it and then explore it. I think the only criticisms there have been of phonics have been around children's enjoyment of reading, and whether or not you're just teaching children to decode. And I think that was quite interesting early in the presentation when Charlotte was talking about, it's about fluency. Phonics is part of that broader reading skills. So you can't enjoy reading or have those broader comprehension skills without it, but alongside phonics you need to be teaching those, and that's certainly what the Little Wandle program does, is it brings together all of those complexities of reading into a program. You absolutely need those phonics skills to be able to tackle a word and have that word reading, but alongside it exploring the word meaning and the broader story and how it works, and gathering meaning from a text, which is what's brought together in the Little Wandle program.
And I'm just looking at the questions, Lizzie, here on the side about EAL children. Yeah. And obviously that's why you need to integrate word meaning, both when you're teaching the words to read, but also that comprehension level and the prosody level is what will help our friends our children who are ESL. That is the bit. And certainly in our schools, Little Wandle comes from a school called Chesterton, and they have got, I think it's more than 80% children are EAL children within the school. So we know that we can teach meaning whilst we teach reading, but you've got to teach meaning. It won't happen just by reading the words.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've already, I was going to say, actually, the two questions that have just come in are very similar. So I think we're just going to wrap that up here. But before we go, Charlotte and Lizzie, I wondered if you could give a very quick kind of summary or something you'd really like to leave our teachers with as they go about their weeks and for the rest of the term in terms of teaching phonics or building confidence in children's reading skills. Lizzie, can I throw it to you first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's been really interesting for me working with Charlotte and the team at Little Wandle is really thinking about the teachers' key. I mean, always the teacher is key, but that modeling and that working with the children and exploring and showing how you as a teacher make meaning from a text, I think is so powerful. And that responsibility of the teacher to sort of do that and to actually teach children to read. It's not just about decoding the words, it's not just the phonics, it's about all of it, and showing them how to enjoy a book and love it. And I think putting that really center stage is really powerful when you see it being done in the classroom.
Can I just say what Lizzie said? Because that's so true. And it is about the whole piece of reading. Reading is not just phonics, and phonics is not just reading. But without the phonics, you can't get there. And without teachers who are expert at it, we can't get our children there. But if you don't put the love of reading around it, if you don't think about this as you are a school that teaches reading in the whole, then that the will and the skill we talk about, don't we? And it's about both of those things. So as teachers, finding books you love reading aloud to children is so powerful. So yeah, do one thing, read aloud to the children, do another thing, talk about your love of reading.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you sign up to our future webinars, and please have a lovely day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.